Hello coders, Synthetic Programming here with another video for you guys today. Today we are doing lesson 10 of our Learn Python Beginner to Expert series. If you are still with us in this series, congratulations, you've made it this far. I'm super proud of you. And today we're going to be writing some advanced functions. I hope you guys are excited. So the first thing we're going to do is so this whole lesson is just us taking what we've learned so far in these other lessons and applying what we know to write some more advanced, cooler functions. And so here's what we're going to do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to write a function that goes through a list and returns another list with every other item in that list. And so how this is going to work is like this. Let's define our every other function like this. And it takes in a starting list like this. And so we'll write our docstring like we usually do because we're great programmers. We want to make sure that everyone can read our code. And we'll say, okay, returns a list with every other item in starting list like this. The type of starting list is just a list like this. And the R type, the type that we're returning, is also a list because we're taking a list and then returning a new list. So here's what we do. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start our new list, and we're going to call it the return list. And it's just going to be an empty list. You can either write list like this, if you remember from our I think second video when we talked about variables and data types. You can either write list like this, or you can actually just make an empty list with brackets. I like to write list like this. That just makes an empty list. Return list is just an empty list right now. Now, then we're going to use a for loop. We're going to say for I in range 0 to the length of list. Actually, here we'll start at 1 because we want every other item. So we're going to take not the first item but the second item, and then we're going to take the fourth item, and then and going on. So then to the length of starting list. So for I in range 1 to the length of the starting list like this. And we're actually going to do the length of the starting list. Actually, no, that works. That's fine. I was going to take away 1, but we don't have to do that. So for I in range 1 to the length of the starting list, if I is divisible by, so if I modulus 2 equals 0, so if it's divisible by 2, then continue. Which just means, all this means is don't do anything. If I is divisible by 2, then just keep on going. Otherwise, if it is divisible by 2, actually, sorry. Yeah, so if I is divisible by 2, continue. But if it's not divisible by 2, then we want to take return list, like this. We want to add, so dot append, and we want to add the thing from starting list. We take starting list, and we want to add the I thing in starting list. If you remember in our last video, we talked about lists, and you can get an item out of a list by taking the name of the list and then adding the number of that thing in the list, starting at 0 and going up until 1 minus the length of the list minus 1. So otherwise, if this number, if I, is 1 or 3 or 5, if it's one of the odd numbers, then we're going to add the item in starting list at that index to the return list. And finally, at the end of this, we return the return list like this. So what this is going to do now is it takes in a starting list. Every other takes in a starting list. It creates a return list and doesn't put anything in it yet. But then for I in range 1 to the length of starting list, so 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up until however long the list is, if it's divisible by if it's divisible by 2, if I is divisible by 2, then it doesn't care about it. But otherwise, then we want to grab that item and we want to add it to the list. And we can test this out right now so you guys can see if it works. Let's pop down here and let's type print every other, and now we need a starting list, and we can just make one up. We can just throw a starting list in here. Let's say how about 1, 2, 3, 4, true, false, apple, peach. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, true, false, apple, peach. Just a bunch of random stuff on the list. And let's see what happens. So see, it skips 1 and adds 2, then it adds 4, then false, and then peach. So 2, 4, false, peach. So we made this function that takes in a starting list and returns every other item in the list, which is awesome. So we did it, guys. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to write a function that takes a word and returns a list with all of the letters from that word. So we're going to define it as, we'll call it word split, because it splits the word into all of its letters, and we need a word. That's what we're taking in. So we'll write our doc string so people can know what our code does, and we'll say splits word into all of its letters. So now we can actually start. So let's we'll call it letter list, and we'll set that equal to an empty list, just like we did before. So letter list is an empty list. Then for each letter in word, because just like how we can go through all the items in a list, we can go through all of the different letters in a word. For each letter in that word, we're going to letter list like this, letter list dot append. We want to add to the letter list that letter like this. And then the last thing we want to do is return letter list like that. So we defined word split, which takes in a word and it splits that word into all of its letters by making a new list, and then for each letter in the word, it adds that letter to letter list right here. See, it adds letter to the letter list and then returns the letter list. I totally forgot to do this before, so we'll do it quickly. The type of word is going to be a string, word is going to be a string, and the R type is going to be a list like this. And actually we can do this too. We can say it's a list of string. If we're being really, really good about it, we can say it's a list of, we really just have to write that it's a list, but it's actually it's a list of strings because each letter is a string. So let's test it out, why don't we? Let's try it down here. We'll say, how about print word split? And I don't know what word you guys want to use. We talked about apple before, so let's just add apple. And what is it going to do? It's going to split up apple into A-P-P-L-E, just like that. And we can say applesauce, and it'll do the same thing. Applesauce. It splits the word into all of its letters. So we did it again, guys. Look how great we're doing. The next thing we're going to do, and the final function we're going to write in this video, is we're going to write a function that returns a list of prime numbers, a list of all the prime numbers from n1 to n2. This is going to be the most complicated function we write today, guys, but I promise you it is not that difficult because we've already written a function before that can help us. So let's start. We'll say def primes from, or here, we'll just say primes. We'll call it primes. We'll define a function called primes that takes two numbers, n1 and n2. So we'll say in our doc string, our fancy schmancy doc string, that returns a list of all primes, oh, not a lost, a list of all primes from n1 to n2, like that. Perfect. So the type of n1, like this, is going to be an integer. The type of n2 is going to be an integer, and let's add our @ symbol like that, and it returns, we'll do @our type, a list of integers. And remember, guys, that our doc strings, these things that we're writing up here, that code doesn't do anything. This is just comments for us. This tells us what our function does, and it tells it what kind of values it takes in, and then what it spits out. So this is just to help us be better programmers. And this is what a company that you'll work for in the future, if you want to do computer science, this is what a company will want you to be doing. So now, let's move on and start writing primes. So the first thing we want to do is we want to make a list. So all the numbers that we're testing, right? We're testing the numbers in a list that we're gonna call list numbers, and in here we want all the numbers. So we're gonna do I for I in range n1 to n2 plus 1. And the reason we do n2 plus 1 is because we want to make sure that we want to include n2. This, if we just did n1 to n2, then it would just do n1 until the number right before n2, but if we do n2 plus 1, this will do n1 to n2 for real, and it'll include it. So now this list has all the numbers I in the range n1 to n2 plus 1. So all those numbers are stored in this list. Now, for each number, we want to make a list that we're going to return. So return list is an empty list right now, but we'll put stuff in it later. The next thing we want to do is we want to go into our for loops video, or sorry, not our for loops, our functions with conditionals code. And remember, we wrote this function is prime, which checks to see if a number is a prime number. So let's grab that actually, and we'll copy it. And here's what we'll do. We'll paste it here. So now, this code doesn't work right now because I copied it in and all these numbers are different. We don't have a variable called number yet, so it doesn't have anything to use this for, but we'll fix that now. So we're going to say for number in numbers. So for every number in this list of numbers that we made, let's take all this and tab it in like this. We're going to say we have prime equals false, and then we have some return stuff down here. We don't want the returns. We're not trying to return anything. What we really want is to change all of these with continues, because we want it to skip this the number it's testing if it's not prime. So instead of setting a variable called prime equal to false, like we did in our last video with this function, we're going to just change all these to continues. So there we go. So if the number doesn't satisfy any of these, it'll continue. Otherwise, it'll take, we can get rid of this prime equals true as well up here. So remember, up here we made a list with all the numbers from n1 to n2 plus 1. Then we made an empty list that we're going to return at the end, and to fill it, for every number that we put in the list numbers, we're going to test if it's prime. If it's not prime, which is this whole thing, it continues because it doesn't care. But if it is prime in the else, we'll say return list dot append and then number, because we want to add number. So we're using append to add number to the return list. And the last thing we do at the end of all this is return the return list. So hopefully this works, guys. Fingers crossed. This one's a big one. Let's see if we can do it. So let's get our console up, and we're going to type print primes. And now we pick two numbers. So let's do all the primes between 23 and 20, all the primes between 23 and 50. Let's try that. Oh, something didn't work. Let's see what it was. Okay guys, I figured it out. I'm kind of stupid. Instead of putting it in the else here, I should have put it right here. Because the else was something that we used before to return false in case it didn't satisfy this property right here. So we can actually get rid of, we can leave this else here, or we can just put continue after this, because if it is an else, then it's not prime. So that was stupid of me. Let's try running it for real now. We're trying to see primes between 23 and 50. Boom, there they are. 23, 29, 31, 37, 41, 43, and 47. Ooh, that was confusing, and the cool thing about this function is we can use it for much bigger numbers. So let's do all the primes between 10 and 100. And there they are, all the primes between 10 and 100. What about 1,000? There they are, all the primes between 10 and 1,000. So that's a pretty advanced function, guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this advanced functions tutorial. I hope you could follow along, and if you couldn't, please ask me any questions that you have in the comments below. I would gladly answer all of them, and the next tutorial we're going to do is going to move on to more advanced topics in Python. This is pretty much all the intermediate stuff, videos 1 through 10. When we move on to video 11, we'll start talking about way more advanced stuff in Python. So I hope to see you guys in the next one. Peace.